Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. This is Charles Gaudet here with one of my top coaches and good friend, Claudia Brown. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Charlie. Great to be here.
Claudia, I'm great. I'm privileged to have the opportunity to be recording our session today because you and I have had so many off-session conversations about sales and business strategy, and we went out to dinner recently, or actually not so recently. It was a few months ago, and
Right.
I remember there was one moment during our conversation where I said, "Man, we really should have recorded this because so many of our listeners would have just been able to enrich their lives, their strategy, and so forth by hearing some of the brilliance that you could have impart
Thank you.
our listeners." So thank you again for being here.
Great. Oh, my pleasure.
So you've been an entrepreneur for a number of different years, and you've had the pleasure of working with companies of all sizes, from small to, what would you say the biggest company you've worked with has been so far?
The biggest company I've worked with was about 36 million.
And so you've also had the pleasure of growing businesses through multiples of different inflection points. I mean, you went through the 2008 inflection point, you went through 2020, and so forth.
Yes.
Let's start there. Let's
All
start
right.
there.
Well, it's an interesting thing. In 2020, everybody was trying to, not 2020, in 2008, people were getting scared, like what's going to happen, whatnot, and the recession hit, and one of the biggest things that I told people and still continue to tell people is don't stop marketing through a down market. The biggest mistake you can make is to actually drop your marketing or stop your marketing during that time, because what happens is that when you stop it, people forget about you, right? But if you continue it, people don't forget about you, and there's an uptick when you come out of that time period where
Yeah.
people now have seen you for that time and will call you first before some of the others.
There's actually a study that was done by the Harvard Business Review. Read this article a while back, and they talked about the companies that rebounded the strongest were the ones that continued to lean in and continue to invest in sales and marketing. And
Yes.
what you're saying is also true, because in a down market, most of your competitors are going to scale back, and they're going to cut their marketing, they're going to cut their sales and so forth. But the entire market doesn't dry up. It just means that our consumers are being more discerning, more careful at how they invest their money. So if you happen to be one of those that are leaning in and you're continuing to invest, you're going to capture more market share in a down economy easier than you would during a bullish economy.
Right, exactly. So yeah, two things happen. One is you capture more market during the down economy, and the second thing is you capture more after that ends.
Mm.
So there's a high probability that your company will actually grow more if you continue through that.
And so what have you noticed through the work that you've done with your clients in 2020 and those that continued to lean in? Where are they now?
Yeah, so the ones who continue to lean in, and part of the leaning in also is actually, it's continuing to market. It's also continuing to innovate and find other ways of growing your business. There were in 2020, it was a little bit different because because of the general combination happening. One is the market went down, but the other thing is that people had to stay home. So a lot of companies were now, especially the owners, were now afraid. So some companies, like one company that I'm continuing to work with, actually created a separate business within their business.
Right.
While their current business went down, they created a separate business. So now, as things are getting better, both businesses are doing well. So they're now doubling their business over time. So just
So
one example.
yeah, and I want to actually touch upon a lesson that I've mentioned in previous episodes, and that is during an inflection point, business owners are forced to make one of four decisions. They either have to change the message to meet the market, they have to change the market to meet the message,
Yeah.
they have to change both the market and the message, or they
Mhm.
sit back, cross their fingers, close your eyes, and they hope that things change. And the
Right.
companies that chose number four, would just so happen to be the majority of companies out there. They just took the advice of popular gurus that said, okay, now's the time to tighten your belt and cut
Mhm.
expenses and so forth.
Right.
Those who chose number four were the ones that struggled, or unfortunately weren't able to survive the 2020 crisis. But
Mhm.
those like your client that you just mentioned that said, okay, you know what, in this particular case, we're going to change both the message and the market.
Right.
We're going to create a new spinoff with the existing organization.
Right.
He continue to thrive and so forth. So if there's one thing that we've learned through 2008 and continued through 2020 is that those that are not just to survive but to come out ahead are going to be those that are going to be that are going to adapt uh, in
Mhm.
the fastest, and those
Right.
who can evolve.
Right. Exactly. And a lot of times it's about the external, it's about the sales, it's about the revenues, but a lot of times what business owners miss is there's actually a lot of internal work that needs to get done in order to make
Mm.
the company thrive as well. So one of the things that I was finding, particularly with the owners, I don't know why it happened over this past year, maybe it was just the group of people I worked with, but a lot of them really missed that they needed a relationship with their staff.
Ah,
And when we could start working a little bit more one-on-one with their staff, and they started to create more of a relationship with their staff, such that it wasn't just like you have to do a job, come in, do a job like a robot and whatnot. When they created a relationship with their staff, when they um, presented more information for their staff about what was happening with their business, when they commended their staff for the work that they were doing, all of a sudden things started picking up. And so it's the external, but it's very much the internal productivity that really makes a difference as well.
that's a really good point. There's the mindset element, right? Like, why is now the best time in the world for us to be in business? And
Yeah.
that's that internal mindset, but it's also the awareness of, where is the team right now?
Hmm.
Um, where's their mindset?
Yeah.
What is the strength of our culture right now?
Right.
Do the team feel like they're part of something bigger? Are they motivated? Are they inspired? Where's the dysfunction inside of the organization? How can I isolate it and eliminate it, and so forth?
Right. Exactly.
So that is actually a really good point. And while we're on the topic of teams, managing a remote team can be difficult, and many of these
Mhm.
companies are going to remain remote, which is great.
Yes.
But also a challenge of being remote is that for some team cultures, they're not used to managing in accordance to some form of KPI or key performance indicator.
Yes.
And so for many organizations, the employees justify their existence by being busy.
Hmm.
And I'm busy, therefore I'm safe. And as long as I'm busy, then everybody else should be happy. But what's the problem, Claudia, with the mentality of just being busy and not having any sort of metric that an employee can own?
I think it's good for the employee's mindset to actually have a metric because it keeps them productive and it holds them accountable to having some goals. And this is another thing that there's some owners are actually doing this, particularly those owners who are billing out, say, on the basis of certain staff that they have, which are doing some of the work. That those people, those business owners have it down and they start holding their people accountable. The ones who don't, what happens is that things start languishing and they can't figure out why. So it's a mindset of both the owner and the staff to be able to have that accountability to get things done. For most relatively smaller companies, it's so close. People are so close to the revenues. In other words, the staff is an integral part of getting the revenues in as well. That most of the time it goes back then to the owner's relationship with their staff to make sure that they're held accountable, that they have weekly meetings, sometimes even daily meetings, sometimes twice a week meetings, just things to stay in touch and communication with the staff to keep things going and keep things on target.
Mm.
And part of that is motivation as well. So if it's motivation in terms of positive motivation, then generally the staff becomes more positive. If it's negative and fear-based, then the staff can kind of close down and not be as positive. So I always encourage the business owner to make sure that they stay in touch with their staff frequently, and also to be positive with their staff and hold them accountable, certainly, for the goals that the business owner is set for, let's say, the week, the month, whatever it is. And then that will help them to keep the company going and flourishing.
It's a good point that you bring up. And the other thing is that as a manager or as the CEO or the business owner, setting these goals or these KPIs, there's a multitude of different ways that they can be set that will help to motivate a team. For example, if you and I are working together, Claudia, and I tell you, here's your quota. If I set a quota that you felt was unachievable or unattainable or whatnot, well, that's not really going to motivate you. And, you're going to do your work. You're going to come as close as you can. But at the end of the day, you're going home and, you're telling your friends that, my boss has me, hitting this particular quota, but I'm not going to be able to hit it. And therefore, I'm not going to get my bonus. And this is unfortunate.
Right.
Or a more strategic CEO could involve you in being able to say, okay, based on the facts in front of us, what do you believe to be a reasonable expectation that I can have? Mm-hmm. And if you feel that maybe that expectation is too safe, you can encourage them maybe by 10%. But when the team owns the quota or they own the KPI, individually, when everybody owns it, they tend to work harder towards achieving it. And that's also a real key important part to managing, is getting buy-in from all individuals.
Agreed. There's one other point too, which is the support of either the business owner or the manager or whoever. So as an example, I worked with a company this year, and I worked in particular with a salesperson. And the salesperson was maybe about $5,000 a month when I started working with him. And
that's what they were generating, or that's their take home?
No, that's what they were generating.
Oh, okay.
And within 6 months, I had them up to 50 to 100,000. So it was about, in this case, it was more about really paying attention to that person. A, wasn't getting enough attention from the business owner. B, wasn't getting positive attention from the business owner. But the business owner did agree that he could use some help. And so I started working with him, and his numbers just shot up. And so this is sort of a testament for the business owners, again, to have that relationship and that support for their people, because when their people feel that, then they start feeling better about themselves, then they become more productive.
You are absolutely correct. And the CEO or the manager's job, and right? So all levels of management in the company. It's also important for them to understand that our job isn't just to hold others accountable to the KPI. Our job is to help them by providing them the coaching, the resources, the training, the playbooks, whatever that might be, to become successful.
Yes.
And so that is another really, really important part of building the type of team and the culture. If you talk to a great salesperson that loves their job and you ask them, how well do you feel supported by management, by the team? They'll say, I feel wonderfully supported.
Mhm.
And in today's hiring environment, you want to make sure that you retain your good people. And part of retaining them is making them feel supported, ensuring that they're happy, allowing them the opportunities and the best chances possible to hit their KPIs so they can get their bonuses, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Right. Exactly. And then, and the other thing is then, within the culture of the company, everybody feels better and everybody's working in the same direction and everybody's more productive all at the same time. So there are many different factors that happen within every single company, and it's the sort of juggling of those factors that to even out a lot of things that it really helps the company to start to grow.
Now, sales is one of your superpowers. Now, you've got multiple superpowers. I mean, you're like Superwoman, right? I mean, you've got multiple different superpowers and strengths, and you've been able to help our clients in a multitude of different ways that have earned you a tremendous reputation inside of our company. And so one of those superpowers is sales. As you've just shared from the most recent example, you took somebody who was only generating $5,000 a month and you 10 and 20x'd their productivity within just a few months.
Yes.
What is the most common problem that you see in sales that is preventing people from hitting the numbers that they otherwise could be prevented? It could be achieving.
The thing that I've actually experienced over time, because I actually didn't start in sales, I started in marketing and business strategy and learned sales over time. And one of the things that shifted my sales around was when I was able to really show the person I was dealing with that I really cared about them. So I call it heart-based selling, because I feel that's just so important. And I see that a lot of salespeople really miss that. They miss the taking care of and support of their prospect in a way that they, instead of just trying to sell something, that they actually have a conversation about it, that they actually create that conversation about what's in it for the prospect rather than why, ABC, here's why it's great. So instead of taking away the product features and benefits, adding those features and benefits into a conversation with the prospect that really creates the value of the product for that person. That's what's really, and with it in a caring way. So it's not a hard sell, it's a sell of really caring and really explaining and promoting the value for that person.
It's interesting. I once heard somebody say, the salesperson that wins the deal, isn't the one with the best moves. It actually happens to be the one that cares the most.
Yeah.
And, when prospects don't buy many times because of price or many things that the salesperson believes is a reason why they lost the deal.
Right.
From my research and understanding, the number one cause is that they feel they haven't been understood. They feel that the salesperson didn't hear them. They didn't understand the problems that they were dealing with. And so the salesperson was so quick to pitch the offer or, close them. Can I send you an agreement? Right. There was a sales trainer that I was actually asked to audit the sales trainer's phone call. And so I audited the call. The sales trainer said, "This is a really good call, by the way. I'm proud to have you listen to it." I'm listening to it. And at the end, the prospect says, or the prospect asked a question. The salesperson answered and said, "Great. So can I send you a proposal?" And the prospect goes, "Well, have you ever worked with a company like mine before?" "Oh yeah, absolutely. And we can help you too. I can promise you. So can I send you a proposal?" And the guy goes, "Well, I mean, I'm happy to review it." And he goes, "Great. Let me confirm my email, blah, blah, I'll send it." And so he sent the proposal and he says, "So I think I got this deal." And I'm like, "You didn't listen to him.
Mm,
He still had other objections.
yes, right.
Just because he asked for a proposal doesn't mean you got the deal. In fact, if I'm going to put money on it, you didn't get the deal."
Right, right.
One of the ways that we've integrated a sales strategy inside of predictable profits, probably the best strategy that I have ever created actually comes to 4 words. And those 4 words happen at the end of the conversation where we've delivered value, as you've talked about, Claudia. Then I stop and I say, "Claudia, ask me a question." 4 words. Ask me a question. If I did a really good job delivering value in the presentation, what do you think the most common response is going to be?
Yeah, it's going to be, so what's the next step?
Right. So what's the next step?
Hmm.
And so you've just told me, Charlie, you have permission to sell me, permission to tell me more about what it's like to do business with you. And so now you're going to be more keenly interested and aware.
Right.
If I missed something and I say, "Claudia, ask me a question," you're more likely going to ask what?
An objection question.
Right. And so I'll answer the objection, be like, "Oh, I'm so glad you asked. I'm sorry, that's my fault. I should have addressed that earlier." So I address the objection and I go, "So that was great. Ask me another question." And I may have to repeat that maybe 3 times, 2 or 3 times before you finally get to the point where you're like, "So what would it be like to work together?"
Right.
But so the deeper psychological rationale behind that strategy is that I'm giving you the illusion of power, because the prospects always want to feel like they're in control, and that they have the freedom and the ability to ask questions and get heard and the whole deal. But also, I'm only selling you when you're ready to be sold. And that's why the ask me a question part happens, because when you're ready, you'll tell me. When you're not ready, you won't even go there.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, and one of the things that that I've learned over time is to, and I love that technique, by the way, it works great. One of the things that I've tried to do is, where I've learned, is to cover any and all objections that you can possibly cover up front.
Yeah.
Some people like to, for instance, I know several salespeople like to just say, "Hey, my process or my product or whatever, my service, it's going to be X amount right at the beginning.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this," or talk about whatever. I don't necessarily do that, but I can see how that can sometimes work. It just covers the objection.
Yeah. And I've heard that before, where right off the bat, somebody will say, "I just need to know, how much does this cost?"
Yes.
And an unsophisticated salesperson will push the question off. Be
Mhm.
like, "Well, we'll get there, but first let me tell you all about me."
Yeah.
And but there's now this lingering pink elephant,
Right.
and it's going to be really difficult for the prospect to pay attention until they get it answered. A more
Yes.
sophisticated salesperson, they're like, "Well, I'm glad you asked. We don't have a cookie cutter scenario here, but I can tell you that our average client will start at around XYZ. But I don't know. Is that a number that scares you?"
Mm.
And get the response right off the bat. Like, "No,
Right,
no,
right,
no, no, that doesn't scare me. Thank you for addressing that."
right.
And you can go from there. Or you might say that, "I'm glad you asked. We don't have a cookie cutter scenario. Our clients range across the board. We have clients paying as much as $100,000 a month. I'm just making numbers up, $100,000 a month, all the way down to, 15,000. But I don't know. Is that a range that scares you?"
Mm.
And just, get them to Get them to respond. We can go even deeper in that, but the reason why I like is that a number that scares you, as I'm actually going for the no.
Yeah.
I want people to be like, no, that doesn't scare me.
Right. Right. Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
a little more disarming. It's a Chris Voss technique, a little more disarming
Mhm.
for people to say
Yes.
no.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So, cool. So what else would you say in sales, and more specifically, if we were to talk about follow-up, would you say has also contributed to your client success?
You're talking about sales follow-up.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
actually
let's
something
talk about follow-up. And yeah.
yeah, that's actually something I studied for a long time. I actually worked in a previous lifetime, so to speak, on the sales follow-up software. So I learned a lot about follow-up, and follow-up is really key. This is another thing actually that I train a lot of my clients with. I actually have like a series of emails. I take them through, I show them what it should look like. But follow-up actually can add up to 65% of sales into any company just by doing consistent follow-up month after month. And there was a study, I don't remember who did the study, but they did a study that proved that yes, if somebody did consistent follow-up, and follow-up doesn't necessarily mean, calling somebody every month to say, hey, how are you doing? Hey, how are you doing? No, follow-up is sending value-based, let's say, emails or information to the prospect. And when there is for instance, follow-up phone call that's planned out, then you have actually something to talk to that person about. Hey, have you read any of my emails? Did you like any of the information I've sent? Now we have a conversation. We don't have just, hey, I'm just checking up on you for the sale, basically.
Yeah.
It's a real conversation that can be had. So I'm very pro on follow-up.
We did a study a while back and found that of marketing qualified leads, so not sales qualified leads, this would be marketing qualified. So sales qualified leads are going to be, the conversion rate is going to be higher. But of the marketing qualified leads, 7.5% of those did business with us between 0 and 90 days. But 42.5% did business between 90 days and 2 years from now. Now, I thought that was interesting. And I also thought that maybe our process was broken. We went back and we looked at our clients and to look at some of the data, especially among other B2B service-based businesses. And we found the numbers to be fairly similar. 7.5% of the marketing qualified leads converted between 0 and 90 days, but 42.5% converted between 90 days and 2 years from now. So fascinating. So then we had to go down a little level deeper and go, what made the difference between when somebody converted earlier and what somebody did to convert later? And one of the interesting revelations was that the more content somebody consumed, the more they converted. And so, like you said, the follow-up with value added information, if you're following up and they're consuming the information because they see that as perceived value, the more that information they're going to consume, the more likely they are to convert into a client.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there are two things that go on. One is that the information then you send is value based, and so they appreciate that. But the other thing that happens is that you're actually positioning yourself with very valuable content for the prospect. So the positioning of you as the seller goes up, right?
Yeah.
And the confidence in the potential buyer or the prospect goes up in you. So there are several things that happen during that process.
That is so true. And then there's other elements that as a seller you also want to pay attention to, and that would be retargeting to stay top of mind, and all these other fun things as a ways to increase the awareness.
Yes.
So I know we're pushing up against the clock, and Claudia, I know you're really busy, so let me ask you, if there was one big piece of advice that you wanted to give to the business owners that are listening today on what it would take to get their business beyond 7 figures, what would you say your number one biggest piece of advice would be?
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice would be take the time to step back and actually look at the business where it is now. So whether you get a coach, consultant, or somebody else outside of it to actually help look at it with you, so you're not looking at it
Mhm.
completely within your own frame of mind. It's good to have those outside eyes to step back with you so that you can see things, or so they can see things that you may not see. You know, every business has blind spots. Every business owner has blind spots. So that's what I would say. I would say step back. The idea is, ultimately is to work smarter, not harder.
That's a good point. So I train in jujitsu, and the gentleman that trains me at one point was number 8 in the world, but he gives the same techniques to the white belts as he does all the way to the black belts.
Mm.
And as a fighter, I'll sit there and I'll try to work moves, and I can't figure out what I'm doing wrong. And sometimes it's as easy as my instructor looking at me and saying, you have to turn your thumb from here to then turning it up. Turn
Mm.
your thumb up. When you turn it up, your elbow will stay closer to your side and your arm will be stronger. And that one little move can make the difference between winning and losing. And, yesterday I had the unique opportunity of speaking with the CEO of a $500 million company. And, you know, people often ask us what's the hardest part of our job. As you know, Claudia, it's coming when we're working with some of the smartest, brightest people on the planet, to be able to come to the table every day and offer value is a real humbling experience, because we do work with some of the smartest people in the world.
Yeah,
It,
absolutely.
and so when you're on the phone with a 500 million, with a CEO of a $500 million company, I can't help but wonder, like, why are we on the phone? And that's what I asked him.
Mm.
Clearly you're doing a lot of things really, really, really well.
Right.
Why are we on the phone? And his first response was, because you offer perspective that I need to get out of my own way.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, that's why when you look at some of the smartest, brightest people on the planet, regardless of if they're professionals, if they're
Mm.
actors, if they're athletes, it's all about, what am I not seeing?
Right.
And
Exactly. The top
and
athletes have coaches too, right?
right. And even though you and I are coaches, we still hire coaches ourselves, many times people
Absolutely.
within our own team, just to be able to say, hey, help me see what I don't see.
Yes,
Great piece of
absolutely.
advice.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, so this is Claudia Brown here. Again, she's one of our top coaches over here at Predictable Profits. She's done absolutely phenomenal job for our team, and I'm so proud to have her with us today, and so proud to have her on the team. So I wanted to give you all the opportunity to meet her yourself, so you can hear some of her wisdom imparted throughout today's episode. And if you'd like to learn more about Claudia, if you'd like the opportunity to speak with her, work with her, please make sure you visit us over at predictableprofits.com. Again, that's predictableprofits.com. Claudia, I hope you and I get to have dinner again soon.
Same, Charlie. I'm
It
looking
definitely
forward.
has been too long, but we'll make sure that happens sooner than later.
That sounds great, Charlie. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much.